Joining us now to analyze today's headlines is Courtney Morris. She's an assistant professor of African American and Women's Studies at Penn State University. Hi, Courtney.
Good morning, Sonali.
A horrific incident in Edmonton, Canada, late yesterday has left police and people shaken. In what is being called, quote, an extreme case of domestic violence, a man shot and killed 4 women, 2 men, and 2 children, and then killed himself. It was the worst mass killing Edmonton has seen since 1956. The shootings were conducted with a stolen gun. Canada's gun control laws are far stricter than here in the U.S., where gun violence is much more common. Just yesterday, a woman in Idaho died after her toddler reached into her purse and accidentally discharged her gun while they were shopping at a Walmart. The woman apparently had a concealed carry weapons permit of the kind championed by the NRA and the gun lobby. It was the latest in a series of accidental killings this year involving children. Courtney, why doesn't the gun lobby think it's important to protect women and children from guns?
Well, I think mostly because it's run predominantly by men, conservative men, who don't want to think about the connection between gun violence and domestic violence. The home is an incredibly dangerous place for women and their children, and the gun lobby, I think, has worked very effectively to obscure those connections. Gun regulation obviously isn't going to solve all of our problems, as the mass killing in Canada demonstrates, but the fact that the last time that Edmonton experienced a mass killing of this scale was in 1956 shows that regulation can go a long way towards diminishing the incidence of gun violence in the home. So it's really unfortunate that the gun lobby refuses to deal with this.
And then for the second time this week, the New York Times editorial board criticized the NYPD's response to Mayor Bill de Blasio over the killings of 2 police officers. Driven by police union chief Patrick Lynch, who said the mayor had, quote, blood on his hands, officers turned their backs on de Blasio during Rafael Ramos's funeral. The Times on Monday blasted the NYPD's, quote, snarling sense of victimhood, and today said that all New Yorkers expect is for officers to not violate the Constitution, not kill unarmed people, and simply do their jobs. As New Year's Eve celebrations gear up for tonight, anti-police brutality activists are also planning protests in New York City's Times Square, Boston's annual First Night event, and likely at many other venues around the nation. Courtney, do you agree with the New York Times' editorial board? And how important is it for these anti-police brutality activists to continue their work?
I absolutely agree with the editorial, and I think most New Yorkers do. The response of the NYPD and the police unions, which essentially digging in their heels and declaring war on the city, makes them come off as smug, arrogant, and self-satisfied. And it's something that I think many New Yorkers are very frustrated with. And it's incredibly important that the work of police reform activism continue. I think a lot about the quote by Frederick Douglass that power concedes nothing without a demand. And I think that the pushback that people are experiencing is actually an indication of how effective the protests have been in changing the tide of public opinion on police violence. So the work really needs to continue, and I think that activists are going to have to work very hard to make sure that the public doesn't lose sight of what its goals really are, which is not to go to war with the police, but is to make policing better, more effective. And this will ultimately, I think, make police officers much safer in the communities that they serve.
And finally, the death of a transgender teenager named Leila Alcorn in Ohio is being investigated as a suicide. Alcorn was hit by a tractor trailer on Sunday, but scheduled a note to be published posthumously on her social media account. In her note, which has now gone viral, Alcorn, who was born Joshua, wrote, quote, after 10 years of confusion, I finally understood who I was. I immediately told my mom, and she reacted extremely negatively, telling me that it was a phase, that I would never truly be a girl, that God doesn't make mistakes, that I am wrong. She also wrote, quote, the only way I will rest in peace is if one day transgender people aren't treated the way I was. They're treated like humans with valid feelings and human rights. My death needs to mean something. But even after her death, Alcorn's mother refused to acknowledge her child's gender identity, writing on Facebook, quote, my sweet 16-year-old son, Joshua Ryan Alcorn, went home to heaven this morning. News media are reporting that Leila Alcorn did receive support among friends at school when she admitted she was attracted to boys. Courtney, how serious is our society's problem of isolating young people who are transgender?
The challenges that transgender youth face in this country are tremendous. They have extraordinarily high rates of homelessness, dropping out of high school. They're much more likely to be victims of sexual violence and street violence, and they also experience very high levels of police harassment. We have this idea, we like to tell transgender youth and queer youth that it gets better, but they know that it's not true. And according to the Youth Suicide Prevention Program, 50% of all transgender youth will likely attempt suicide before their 20th birthday. So this is not an aberration. And it's clear that we need to do more as a culture to make sure that transgender youth know that they're supported and that they're protected and that they are safe.
Well, Courtney Morris, I want to thank you, as always, for joining us. We'll talk to you in the new year.
Happy New Year, Sonali.
Courtney Morris is an assistant professor of African American and Women's Studies at Penn State University. This is Uprising, and by the way, thanks to you, we have met and surpassed our goal of 1,000 viewers, 1,000 subscribers, that is, to our YouTube channel. You can subscribe online at youtube.com/uprising with Sonali. This is Uprising. When we come back, we'll review the entire year of domestic news and foreign policy news, the biggest stories of the year, that is, with my guests, Michelle Chen, and then the second part of the show, John Pfeffer. Stay tuned.